we're going to trade this little ruin here for this portion of land back there. So this building, when it was standing, housed the tank that holds the oil for our furnace, a power source, and also a water source. So I'm just gonna dig a trench from that point over there, basically just directly to inside of the gate there. Got a couple tools to try to keep the hole small and tight, and then I'm gonna drop the new tubing to extend the fuel line, new cable to extend the power source, and new tubing to extend the water supply source over that way. I bought what I did to keep the project kind of cost effective and to do it as quickly as I can with what I could find nearby. Sometimes it's not easy to find certain things here in Spain, so sometimes I'm happy with what I find and I go with it, and then I try to modify that the best I can. So let's get to trenching. Where it lays flat down in there is, I would say, roughly about a half a meter. So if I guessed roughly like 1.5 feet, I'm gonna come back a little bit further where it originally runs so that I can bend it into this trench that I intend to dig here. As you can see, I've marked the route. I think I did pretty good. It seems pretty straight. I'm really liking this tool because it enables me to actually scoop quite a bit out of that trench as I go along. Holy crap, I don't think we've worked that hard in a while, but I think we just worked about 5.5 hours today. Let's say we did 5 hours yesterday. We dug this in roughly 10 hours. That's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Does your body feel like we did it in 10 hours?
Yeah, I feel like Jack, for sure.
We are going to attempt now to move the tank. We've uncovered the tank. Quick one, I put some green tape on my outlet to the furnace, and I marked the line itself as well. So where the tubing is pulling the gas oil from the tank, I marked that area green, and as well as the tubing, to do myself a favor for when I move the tank and I reconnect it. Holy crap, we didn't plan very well on moving this tank, but we got it. We moved it. Let's go over here and we will get these lines pulled through from where they used to be and get them laid, the fuel lines first for the tank.
All right, so here's my new trench, here's my old trench, and I got the other two lines pulled through, but I'll pull these through now. They should come through pretty easy, hopefully. Oh yeah, that was pretty easy. And I'm just gonna pull these out of the way and then kind of clean that bit of the trench up a bit more if I can. So we've got that casing insulation off of these, and I've laid them out. I actually bought quite a bit of tubing, way more than I need. But what I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna leave quite a bit of excess on it so that if I want to then move it again within my ruin, I'll be free to do that without creating another splice. I don't want to have 2 or 3 length splices. I'd just rather have the excess now and then trim the fat when I move it to where it will be permanently. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this tubing here and lay a bit out, and then we're going to get our connectors going, and then hopefully we can get that tank all hooked up. Before I pulled these tubes through that wall, I pinched them closed so that the inside of the tube would also stay clean and that the fuel that was in there wouldn't spill out. I've got my 2 new lengths cut. On one end I left it open, but I set that open end on top of the tubing. The other end I've taped closed so that it doesn't get dirt and rocks in it while I'm working connecting these two. But what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to cut these to be the same length. I'm going to cut these both now. This blade actually slices through these pretty easily. So thankfully I did have the one that's going to go from the tank to the house marked from a prior job I did on that tank. So since I cut my green marking off, I have this blue one here. So what I've got in my pocket is these connectors. They're basically 2 female ends on each end, and then it'll just slide over the old tube. So I'll just wipe this a little without trying to get too much fuel on me. I've never used one of these before. The people at the Ayoa, which is the like hardware store near us, gave them to me. It's on there pretty snug. I can't pull it back off. So I've got the 2 new connectors, and then I'll just take one of my new ends, snap that on. Seems pretty good. And then I'll do the same with my other one. Awesome. So as you can see, these are connected now, pretty snug. Can't pull those apart. And then what we'll do now is run the length of this tubing out to the tank and get it connected with the new connectors I bought. And so this will be connected to the tank, then the tube will go into there, and then this will be around the tube already, and the tube will pop on this tapered end, and then this will compress the tube, and it should be much better than the one I did have on there, which was broken anyway. I'm not sure if Teflon tape is good for this, because I'm not sure if Teflon tape will be eaten away by diesel fuel. Okay, I've got the Teflon tape on there, and I'm just snugging these up a bit, and then I'm going to connect to the new lines. I'm going to unscrew the end cap here on this one that is to the furnace. I marked that one originally with green, and then once I added the extension, I put blue on here. So I'm going to put this over the hose, and then I'm going to pop this onto this nipple, I'll call it. And you're going to push that back as far as you can. Oh, that was nice. And then we should just be able to get this to thread over that. I brought up some pliers to snug that down. Now I'll just do the same to the return side. So what the return side is doing is the furnace isn't able to burn all the fuel. Remember to put that over first before you slide that over that nipple. The furnace isn't able to burn all the fuel at once, and so the furnace returns the unused fuel to the tank through this line. So let's snug this up. So the reason I've waited to put this inside of the casing is I want to go run the furnace and make sure that there's no leaks in this fuel line at that splice point, because I've never used those connectors before. So there's a way for me to run the furnace without it turning on. I believe I remember how to do that correctly. So I'm going to go cycle that so it starts pumping this fuel without firing. And if we've done it correctly, this should start to pump out to the furnace, and then the fuel should start returning back to the tank through this line. And then once we've established that the air is out of the system, we will go check the connector point and see if it's leaking. All right, we're functioning. This is pretty cool, actually. I'll show you this. Open this up real quick. I don't know if you can see that, but there's only one tube that runs down there, and the return splashes against that hose and runs on the outside of it, whilst the tube itself is what's actually bringing the fuel up and into the house. It's kind of a neat little system. So here we've got the fuel running to the house. This is the unused fuel running back. And then let's go check our connections. Man, I'd say they're freaking working pretty good. We were able to get the housing on this tubing yesterday, and we've actually ran that furnace several times after we got those tubes reconnected with the housing around them, and everything's functioning well. So those lines are actually ready to go into the ground. Next, we're going to move on to extending the water supply line. Most of this PEX line that you see has actually been exposed for quite some time, so it's pretty chewed up. I'm going to do my best to cut that housing back quite a bit so I can get some tubing that's nice and fresh from having not been exposed to rubbing against the concrete and the rocks in the ground, and make my connection there. I'd rather have a nice clean point to make that connection. I was able to take that housing back and get a fairly decent spot. The original housing is actually quite filled with dirt and rocks. It has been fairly compromised. It's all pretty dry rotted and stuff, so I made a nice clean point here, and I knocked out as much of the mud and dirt from there as I could, and I think I have a decent spot. I'm going to wipe it up a little bit, and then I'm going to cut that excess off. We'll trash that. I was able to slice through that PEX and this gas tubing actually with my blade like super easy. We've got what we think is an appropriate amount of the PEX tubing ran out for our water supply. I figured I'd show you guys how these work if you're curious. So you put the collar and the nut around the tubing, and then you put the female end with the gaskets inside of the tubing, and slide that all up, and then start tightening it. And then there's a bit in the middle that you can get your wrench on, and then you can go on the outside with another crescent wrench or whatever you've got and start snugging up that compression fitting. So that compressed on there really nice. It actually felt really good when I was doing it. I think I'm really gonna like this connection here, and hopefully it won't corrode too rapidly being in the ground. Maybe I'll have to do a repair on this after a few years, but I'm going to do my best to maybe tape it or whatever, and then I'm going to put it inside that housing as well. So fingers crossed on that. So I've got the end piece on now. It was the same basically compression, exactly the same with the compression, except rather than having a connector, it just has this female end that will receive the hose bib or the water spigot. We're going to put a little Teflon tape on the spigot, thread it into that base there that's connected to that PEX line, and test our system and make sure we don't have any leaks. This seems to be working out great. This line is under pressure now, and there isn't even a hint of leak. Let's go to the other end and check it. This end is also not showing any signs of leaking. I was going to mount it like this, because to me it would seem you would mount it this way with the line coming in from the bottom, but this bib I bought lines this way. Not fond of that, but that's okay because it's not leaking, so I can deal with it. After testing that to make sure that under pressure it wasn't leaking, we went ahead and took that end off and slid that housing down all the way on this water line. So that's looking pretty good. Now that we've put the housing, we did test it again for leaks, and we're still looking good. We're on to the last part of our quest here, which is connecting the power supply. I've cut the extension link, and I've begun soldering and shrink wrapping the wires. I'm gonna go ahead and get that done, and then we will work on getting the end on. We put this black housing on the outside of that new power cord extension. However, unfortunately, of all the things I bought, this is the only thing I was short on. Everything else I have excess of. Thankfully, I had excess of this blue line, so I just spliced it together. That corrugated, it fit right inside of the other one really nice. It's not exactly what I wanted. I wanted black coming out of the ground for the power supply, but I'm going to be okay with blue. Now that we've got everything connected, extended and connected and housed, we are going to pull everything out of the trench and clean out everything that's fallen out. And then once we do that, we're going to put a layer of sand down. So we've got the trench with one layer of sand on the base, and now we're going to rest everything on top of that layer of sand. Since this yellow housing was much bigger than these and there was some open space, I figured I would shoot some foam in there to close that up. So that seems to be working out all right. Hopefully that keeps water and dirt and critters or whatever from getting back inside that tubing. Well, check it out. Master Excavator Rachel has made this bad boy pretty clean. We went ahead and put that bottom layer, ran all the tubes, and then we covered the tubing in a nice layer of sand as well, so it's kind of encased in a nice little layer of sand, and then we just threw down all the soil back. After trying to drill into that rock to mount the spigot and the power outlet, I
I've decided to just put a post in the ground. So thankfully, in this pile of wood that we actually took out of this ruin when we first cleaned it up, there's a nice square piece. I think I'm going to cut that down and use that as my post that I'm going to mount that stuff to. We went ahead and got this tank covered with the tarp that we've been covering it with. That helps to protect it from the UV light. And we also went ahead and we put this little post here in the ground. We're just letting that dry up. Our little post dried up pretty firm. I'm feeling pretty good about that. We're gonna go ahead and trim this water line down a little bit so that way it sits about halfway up that post. And I'm gonna put the water outlet on this side of that post. And then I think I'm gonna mount the 2 power outlets on this side of the post at the top. That way they each have their own side and the water is quite a bit below the power source. Success on the water line. I did make like a Frankenstein handle out of the old one and the new one. The new one actually was lining up so that it was facing upward, as I showed. I saw the old one just kind of laying out in the dirt, and I said, you know what, let's see how that one lines up. And it lined up with it actually facing down. So what I did was I took some of the new pieces off of the new one and I just put them on here, the quick connector, the handle, and so on and so forth. And now I have a functioning water spigot. Okay, things are going pretty good. So this wire is mine coming in from the house to supply power to this outlet. And then as you can see, there's a jumper from this outlet to this outlet. So I'm just going to wire into this outlet, and then this outlet should be powered by this jumper. Well, I think it came out okay. I'm sure there's some things I could have done better, but what I had in the budget we were working with and the time we were working in, I think we did pretty good. I got this mounted, and once I mounted it, I did put a bead of silicone around it, and I put some along these cracks where the front meets the back of the housing. It's supposed to be watertight, but I don't know if it's supposed to be necessarily that watertight. If you look on the plug, they kind of only work based off of this hood covers the outlet, and then excess water runs out the bottom. So, you know, they're probably not the best, but I think for now, this will be pretty good. I'm going to actually keep this off at the main inside and only throw it on when I come outside. So I should be okay with that. In the future, if I need to buy a better outlet, I will. One that's more appropriate for exterior, like all weather. But I think this came out okay, and for our needs, we'll see how it works out. This came out okay as well. I did get it to face down. I did put some zip ties on there just to make it look a little cleaner, but I'll probably buy some metal clips that go around these tubings later, because I would imagine the sun will rot this stuff out and it'll crack later. The little bit of line that runs to here, I figured I'd use a little bit of the excess green insulation I have and kind of cover that so it doesn't get a bunch of UV and sun rot either, but it should get a lot of shade here, at least now in the fall and the winter and the spring. Maybe in the dead of summer it'll get a lot of sun. But I think for the most part, this should be pretty good, and this stuff shouldn't rot out too quickly. In all, it took us maybe 5 or 6 days, maybe less than 5 or 6 hours per day on average. So yeah, thanks for coming along, checking out our project of moving the water, power, and gas supply lines from one of our ruins to the other.